So good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the URI Foundation and Alumni Engagement and the Women's Leadership Council, I'd like to welcome you to today's program. My name is Sarah Bordelot, and I'm an Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement. This Women in Leadership Speaker Series is designed to bring attention to the many successful alumni of the University of Rhode Island by highlighting their career paths, providing inspiration, and sharing their knowledge and experiences with students and alumni. I'd like to note that this program is being recorded for future viewing. And before we get started, I do want to extend a special thank you to the President of the URI Foundation and Alumni Engagement, Lil O'Rourke, and Vice President of Alumni Engagement, Michelle Nada. Many thanks for your support of this program and for joining us today. I'd also like to highlight the Women's Leadership Council. Led by a group of volunteer alumni, this council seeks to develop opportunities for all URI women by offering programs for alumni to interact with and act as role models for students and one another. Additionally, the Women's Leadership Council supports and promotes the Women Transforming Women Endowed Scholarship, a scholarship that is awarded each year to a woman-identified student who holds a leadership position and maintains a GPA of at least 3.0. Within a few days of this program, we will send out the webinar recording as well as a link to give to this important scholarship. I am really looking forward to today's program. We are joined by Kelly Lockwood Primus, class of 1984, and I will introduce her in just a moment. If you've joined us on previous programs in this series, you know that we've done a question and answer style format, but today's going to be a little bit different. We're actually going to start with a few questions for Kelly to learn a bit about her extensive background and experiences, but then we're going to shift to Kelly's presentation entitled The Career Advice You Probably Didn't Get. I have no doubt that our audience will have many takeaways from this presentation that you may be able to apply to your own career paths and endeavors. As you have questions along the way, please feel free to write them in the Q&A feature located on your Zoom taskbar, and we will save the last 15 minutes or so to read those questions. We may not be able to get to all of them today, but we will certainly do our best. Kelly was recently promoted to CEO of LeadingNOW, a management consulting company that supports diversity, equity, and inclusion programs for corporate clients. Prior to this promotion, Kelly served as CEO and president of LeadingNOW's subsidiary, Leading Women, a company at the forefront for advocating women's advancement and engaging male allies to bring gender balance to leadership. Before joining Leading Women in 2013, Kelly was a member of the executive team for Women's Foodservice Forum, a national nonprofit women's leadership organization. And prior to going into leadership development, Kelly's career was in consumer products, where she worked her way up the corporate ladder into the position of a corporate vice president and general manager of a business unit. Kelly received her bachelor's degree in history and political science in 1984 from URI, and since graduating, she's also participated in executive leadership programs at Boston College and Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. And finally, Kelly stays active with URI as a member of the Women's Leadership Council, helping to support women and advance the Women Transforming Women Scholarship. Kelly, I am very excited to welcome you today.
Thanks, Sarah. Nice to be here, and thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Of course, and we're actually just going to dive right in because we have a lot to cover in a pretty short amount of time. So we will start with some questions to let our audience get to know you better, and then we're going to transition into your presentation.
Okay.
So to start, I think you are just in such an exciting industry, and I would love to know and hear about how you got to be the CEO of LeadingNOW and what led you to a career that focused on advancing women in the workplace.
Well, thank you. I spent the majority of my career working in consumer product companies, doing marketing, communications, operations, running organizations, and so forth. And I had the opportunity during one gig to get connected with the women's MBA program at Wake Forest University. I was in North Carolina for a short period of time. And what I learned from these women who are all, asking questions and looking for mentors and struggling to figure out what to do with their careers, it occurred to me that I was enjoying that time with them more than the job I was doing and getting paid for. And so it it made me think that there might be a way to share my passion for bringing more women into leadership, a way to make a career out of it. And so there was a woman at this organization that I was working at the time who was on the board of the Women's Foodservice Forum. And she ended up connecting me with the CEO of the organization and helping me transition out of consumer products and into leadership development. And so that was in 2010, and I haven't gone back since, and I never will. This is way too much fun.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, it's great to have the fun element is makes it all worthwhile, I'm sure. And just our next question, who or what inspires you? You do a lot of inspiring yourself, but who or what inspires you?
You know, that's a really hard question because in the last year, so much has gone on that I probably a year ago would have answered Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Since COVID, I would probably say every single medical professional and scientist who is doing everything they can to take care of the world. Today, I'll answer that question and say my team at LeadingNOW and all of the clients that we work with who are doing everything they can to level the playing field so that everyone, regardless of your background, regardless of your heritage, regardless of your gender, has an opportunity to be a leader. And that is why it's so much fun to do what I do every day. So I'm going to say my team and our clients inspire me today.
You're right. Like, it's been such a challenging year, and to see all the good that's come out of it, and how much all this situation has done to inspire others to try new things, to create new things. Like, that's such a great answer.
And you know what? I'm sorry. I meant to wear pearls today on behalf of Pamela, and I spaced it. So sorry about that. But yeah,
that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
I've got a small one on. I don't have a true thing, but I've got one. And this is a little bit more of a fun question. I think it's a great question. What did you want to be when you grew up?
A lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer, and I went to URI, and that's hence the political science degree. And got, I think, to my fall semester junior year and started taking like pre-law classes, and realized I was the only one sitting in the room whose brain was thinking this way and everybody else was thinking this way. I think I got that right, left, right. And that was the worst grade I'd ever gotten in school. I did not understand it. I was not following it. So I went home Christmas break and broke my father's heart and told him, yeah, I'm not going to be a lawyer. And he's like, well, now what? And I'm like, I have no idea. No idea. I had spent all of high school, all of college to that point saying, I'm going to be a lawyer. My first job out of college in 1984, I went to work for a human resources firm. And funny, now it's how many years later? Not quite 40 years later, and I'm back in human resources. So, and somehow along the way, I think right about the time when I was 25, I finally, found my way into a role in marketing and communications. And just before that job, I was a contract administrator. So, I mean, I went from human resources to contract administration, like a lawyer, and then into marketing and communications, and finally found what I wanted to be when I was about 25.
Any regrets on not pursuing the law piece?
You know what? No, not at all. Although, quite frankly, I work with lawyers all the time, and I find that I completely understand what they're doing, and I understand how they think and so forth. So I don't know what happened to me in college. But no, I'm kind of glad I didn't become a lawyer. I have a much broader exposure doing all the different things that I got to do. So,
yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like you've landed in a position that just suits you to a T, and leading a company like LeadingNOW, and still having the ability to work with lawyers, you still kind of get that little taste of it, I'm sure.
Yes.
So that's exciting. So next question I have: what do you feel like is the biggest factor in bringing more women into leadership roles?
So, you know what, I want to say there's actually two reasons, two challenges out there that are preventing more women from reaching leadership. The first is the culture of organizations and who's running them and whether or not they intentionally plan succession plans and things so that women have opportunities and see other women in leadership roles. If your organization, and trust me, every time we have a conversation with someone in a different industry, they always say, oh, ours is the worst. We don't have women in leadership and we really need help. I can tell you across the board, other than consumer products, I would say almost every industry struggles to get women in leadership.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is because the leadership styles of organizations, the culture of organizations that don't embrace different perspectives. And then the second half of it is that, and we're going to go through this in my presentation, is that there are skill sets and knowledge that women need to have, and not only need to have it, but demonstrate that they have it in ways that we're not normally comfortable with, women in general. That if you don't demonstrate these skill sets, leaders of organizations don't think you're ready or capable. And so part of what we're going to talk about today is what is it that you need to do personally? And on the flip side, Leading Now will help fix the cultures of the corporations so that you have a better opportunity than I did. I was usually the only woman at the table through most of my career as I went up the ladder. And I have no idea why at the time. I didn't know what it was that I was doing differently. I now know, but back then I had no idea because I didn't have any mentors. And I didn't have anybody who would tell me how to do things the right way or the way it should be done to be seen as a potential leader. So, so today's going to be a lot of fun for me. I've jammed a lot of information into a short period of time, and I'm hoping everybody takes away at least one idea from it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my notebook ready and my pen, so I am looking forward to this as well. So I thank you so much for responding to those questions, and I'm glad that the audience had the opportunity just to learn a little bit about you before we dive in. So yeah, let's go ahead and shift gears and really get to the heart of this program, which is your presentation, the career advice you probably didn't get. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, let's see if I don't screw this up.
Sure. Yeah.
Let me share. There we go. Okay.
Looks great.
Everybody
great.
Can see it? Okay.
Sure can.
All right, awesome. All right, so today we're really going to talk about two things, right? The first is, let's see if I can get this to advance. Okay, now it's not letting me advance, Sarah. Hold on. It worked before.
It did work before, I assure everybody.
It did. I swear to God, now I'm turning all red. Yes, it worked.
That's no okay.
Before. Let's see if, there we go. Okay.
All right, great.
So there's two things I want the participants on this webinar to think about for themselves. One is, what word would you use to describe a leader? And it can be a leader in your company, in your life, in business, in government, anywhere, I don't care. Think of a word you'd use to describe them. And then the second thing I want you to think about is, what is the best career advice you've received? Okay? And now we're going to roll really quickly. Leading Now uses a definition of leadership that we have found works for everyone, regardless of your background, what country you live in, what your experiences have been. But there's a three-part definition for leadership that talks about using the greatness in you to achieve and sustain extraordinary outcomes by engaging the greatness of others. And we're going to go into each one of these three areas just to give you a better understanding of what we mean by that. So when we talk about using the greatness in you, we talk about, what are your strengths? What knowledge do you have? What are your skill sets? What are your personal characteristics? Are you ethical, daring, passionate about what you do? And do you demonstrate that skill set to, and those behaviors to, the organization that you work within? What are the influences in your life? You have URI as an influence in some of the professors there, or some of the organizations that you belong to at the university that help frame who you are and what makes you great. The second part of this definition talks about achieving and sustaining extraordinary outcomes. And when I give this presentation at conferences and so forth, I always tell everybody, pull out your phone. That's the money slide. This is the most important slide pretty much that you're going to see. But don't worry, Sarah says this is being recorded, so you can always come back to it. But the point about achieving and sustaining extraordinary outcomes, what that means is understanding the business that you work for. How does it make its decisions? How does it make its money? How does strategy get created? What does your leadership talk about? When you look at the financials, and if you're in a public company, the world is looking at your financials. If you're in a private company, you may not have access to them, so go find a competitor who's in the public space. But get comfortable with the financials of your organization and be able to understand the story that those numbers tell. Then we talk about strategy and strategic acumen. Do you understand the play between what's happening in the industry and outside world versus what's the work that's being done internally and how they interact? How the company sets the goals for the organization, and how do you connect what you do and what your team does to the strategy to make sure you're supporting it in every way? There's ways to learn all of this. I promise you, if you've never heard of this before, don't be surprised. Okay? And then the third part of the definition talks about engaging the greatness of others. And what we mean here is the ability to motivate people on your team or others on a project that you work together with, how to make sure you are utilizing communication skills and transferring the knowledge that you have. And then how are you forming relationships with people in your organization and without your organization, within your industry? And how do you make sure that you are showing up as the leader that you need to be by utilizing these relationships? And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about engaging the greatness of others. And I want to tell you why this is so important. So when you thought about that word to describe a leader, what word did you use? Did you use something like inspirational, motivational, focused, hard worker, something along those lines? If you did, you're talking about the greatness in that person. If you talk about them as someone who leads people well, or really does a good job with building teams and leading projects and getting people to move along and do good work, you're talking about engaging the greatness of others. I can tell you that every time I've done this presentation, and including in front of audiences of hundreds and hundreds of people, when I get done with those two statements and I say, okay, how many of you, please raise your hand, show me, did your words fall into those two categories? And I will tell you that 98% of every single audience will say yes, because that's how we describe leaders. There's a problem with that, because if you weren't talking about someone who delivers results, or who is strategic, or who understands finances, or things like that, you've lost what we consider to be a third of the definition of a leader. So when we talk about this three-part leadership definition and why it's important, I'm going to break it down to you here. When we talk about using the greatness in you, when we've asked bosses around the world, who are better at this, men or women? They say, no, they're equal. Men and women are equally good at being personally good, great, and showing up as a leader. When we talk about engaging the greatness of others, how do you think bosses rated men and women? Well, they came up and said, women outperform men in communication, willingness to listen, working with a diverse group of people, developing their talent, advocating for her people, getting people enthusiastic, demonstrating empathy, inspiring confidence. However, these two areas are what bosses told us women are not good at. We don't delegate, and we don't use our organizational networks to promote the business and move things along. And I can tell you that these are two skill sets that are highly necessary for women to be able to demonstrate. You have to be able to let go. You have to, in order to get here, you got to let go of some of this. So if you want to go up in your career, you need to learn to delegate and not be so obsessed with everything. You have to trust others and you have to bring them along. And then the other thing is that you really have to develop your internal network within your organization and within your industry if you want to succeed. And I had a funny story I wanted to tell around here about myself in my career, walking into a meeting and having the vice president tell us that we needed to produce a video for this new product. This is back in the 90s. And he said, Kelly, you can take care of that, right? Because I was the director. I'm like, sure, no problem. I can totally do that. Walked out of the room and went, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before. Thankfully, I had a really good friend from the last company who did this. And I reached out to her as she was part of my network. And I said, Joy, I need your help. I've been asked to do this and I don't know what I'm doing. And I just told them, sure, no problem. I'll make it happen. And she helped me. So I was able to leverage someone in my network to make me appear like I knew what I was doing at a time when I had no clue. And so it's really important for women to build these kinds of networks in order to have somebody who can step in and help you behind the scenes, okay? Now, the last part of this is the achieving and sustaining extraordinary outcomes. And what do you think bosses think about men and women with regard to this? And if you answered that bosses see men outperforming women in this area, they see men demonstrating business smarts, strategy and the understanding of it, finances, creating a vision, understanding the big picture, and being a really good decision maker. Women don't show up because we've spent way too much time, we call this, the missing 33% of the leadership definition. Why is this important? It's important because we spent time asking leadership and HR people, what are the competencies that leaders need to demonstrate in order to be put into senior leadership roles? And the criteria for these people included 50% of the competencies were about outcomes, strategy, finance, business acumen. 26% was about engaging others, and 24% was about demonstrating personal greatness. So when you think about what's the most important thing that you need to demonstrate in order to be seen as a high potential within your organization, it's delivering outcomes, finance, strategy, business acumen. And yet, when you look at how leaders look at men and women, in the outcomes, women don't even show up. We are down here. Engaging others, we outperform. Personal greatness, we're equal to men. But right here, where the decisions are made, women are not seen as having those skill sets. And why is that? Right? So when we talk about this missing 33% and the career advice you need to have, why is it we're not getting that information? So let's talk about what is the best career advice you've gotten, and think about what you answered before and what you thought about before. What have you been told? Get a mentor, learn to negotiate, speak up, have an idea, share it with the team. All of these things are not about the outcomes and business strategic and financial acumen. Normally we would do a poll and all kinds of stuff and have people answer, but unfortunately we're limited for time. So I'm gonna just keep going. Okay, so what is the advice that women have been given in books, magazines, in conferences, in speaking, in any conversation that you have? These are the career advice women have been given. Negotiate, be assertive, be confident, get a mentor, speak up, engage your teams, make sure you self-promote, develop your personal brand, network, set career goals, hone your interpersonal skills. These are all very important and you need to have them, but they are not what's going to get you into leadership. Because when we plot those on the definition of leadership, look at where they all land. So, conventional advice isn't going to get you to the top if outcomes, business, strategic, and financial acumen are the things that leaders are looking for. So if you're not demonstrating them and you're demonstrating all of these other things, that's great and it'll get you to middle management, but it'll never get you out of middle management. So women's best career advice puts us behind men every single time because we are not focusing on the skill sets needed to be demonstrated. So here are those same things. They are all important to get from career start. So for those of you who are graduating in the next year or two, those of you who are young alumni, recognize as you begin your career, these are all the things you need to have. And I'm pretty sure URI has a mentoring program available. So if you haven't joined it, do it now or when this is over. But make sure that you start talking with a mentor about the things that you need to learn and demonstrate in order to be seen as ready to move into management. So when we talk about career start, we're talking about someone who's an individual contributor who doesn't have leadership requirements. They don't have a team that they manage. You are an individual contributor. To move from that to being someone who's a supervisor or a people manager, or even someone who's going to lead a project, you have to demonstrate that you have all of these capabilities. But you're not done. Sorry. The next thing you have to do when you are in middle management, when you are a manager or a senior manager, you need to start demonstrating that you understand the finances of the company. And if you do not, and it's okay to say you don't, because I didn't, find someone in finance, someone in your company in accounting or finance, and ask them to teach you. Trust me, nobody ever wants to listen to the accountants. They're not very inspiring. They don't usually have a whole lot of funny stories to tell. I had a guy named Steve who I love, and he is a really good friend of mine to date. But my Steve would every month sit down with me and walk me through the numbers and try to break it into my head what it is I needed to understand, because I was getting all hung up on the bottom line, and I was getting all hung up on the fact that, you know, we were off by a decimal point here or there, or off by $1,000 in my department budget. And he'd say, Kelly, it's a rounding error. Stop worrying about that. Think about the big picture for the organization. How is what you're doing impacting that? Learn your business. Understand how you fit in the marketplace. Who do you compete with? How are you doing against them? How do decisions get made? What is your organization's strategy? What are its goals? How is what you are doing supporting that? Be for the business. And make sure, no matter what you do, you act like you own it. That will move you along the chain within middle management, manager, senior manager, director, senior director. But if you want to jump that great divide and get into senior leadership, you want to be a vice president, you want to be an executive vice president, you want to be a CFO, a CEO, a chief marketing officer, anybody with a C in front of their name, chief human resource officer, you need a whole new skill set to jump the great divide. And these are the 9 things we're going to talk about today. You need to demonstrate you understand business. There are books you can read. There are people you can ask within your company to help teach you your company's business. You need to develop your strategic acumen and a track record of demonstrating that you are doing the things that are necessary to reach those goals. You have to be able to read your financial statements, and you have to be able to understand the story they're being told. If you are in a public company, do yourself a favor right now. Go, again, after this session is over, go and look at the schedule that has been set for the investors as to when earnings calls are going to be released for the organization, and go back and watch and listen to the last one that they just had, because your finance people, your CFO, your CEO are on these calls, and they're presenting out to the shareholders and to analysts what's going on in your company. And they're going to share with them the numbers, and then they're going to tell them a story. And you can start to follow along as to how that story shifts. And they're going to talk about the money that they're going to be investing in X, Y, and Z, and why that's important to the company. So do yourself a favor, start paying attention to that. And if you work for a private company or a nonprofit, and you don't have access to that kind of knowledge, pick a public company. Pick Nike, pick Reebok, pick any local company that is a publicly held company that might inspire you, and you can follow along their earnings calls because it's all public. Build relationships inside and outside of your organization. You need to be seen as someone who understands the industry you work in. You have to be seen as someone who's in the know and has people you can reach out to within the industry. If there's an association that's tied to your organization or to your industry, join it. Start asking questions, ask for mentors, find people you can have conversations with. It can all be done virtually. You need to work on your communication skills. You need to be able to deliver your ideas and your presentations in the language of your company's business. Okay? You need to be able, when you are a manager, to align what your team does to the strategy of the organization and the goals. And make sure when you're talking about it, whenever you're in a meeting with your boss or with leadership or with anybody in the company and you're talking about what your team does, make sure you're using the language that shares what you're doing to the strategy of the organization. Executive presence is a word or two words that have been bantered back and forth a million times. And executive presence isn't about what you wear or how you look. It's important. I will not discard that. You need to look groomed. But executive presence is more about the ability to share the knowledge that you have using the language of business and the strategy of your organization. Because if you can demonstrate that you understand how your business works, how what you do aligns with that, and speak in headlines and not details, you will get noticed a lot faster within your organization. For those of you who work for big enough companies, you need the opportunity to have international exposure and jobs that align with the strategy of the organization. And you also, they call them line jobs, but we're talking about operations here. We're not talking about always being the person who does marketing. Do you understand how products are developed? Do you understand how they're manufactured? Do you understand, within any organization, how is the software created? These are all operational roles that teach you more about your business. And by having that exposure, by having those opportunities, you get seen as knowing how the business works. And if you don't have the opportunity to take a job, ask if you can shadow someone who has that job. Ask them, and it means a little more time on your schedule, but ask them to help you understand what it is they do. Okay? And the last piece of this is you need a mentor. I cannot say this enough times, but when you have a mentor, don't ask them to mentor you on personal greatness or engaging others. Have them mentor you on business, strategic, and financial acumen. Okay, so with that being said, there are a couple things I want you to do after you leave today. One is find a company that's public, if it's not your own. Go watch their earnings call or listen to their earnings call, look at their annual reports, look at their quarterly reports, start to get familiar with what those look like, and listen every quarter to what is being said by those people, because it will help you understand from the beginning of the year, because it's January, they're about to be announcing their year-end results from the previous year. That's always a great place to start. The annual report will come out in the next month or two. They'll do an earnings call that talks about the entire last year. And then every quarter, they'll update the analysts and their investors as to what's going on now. So do yourself a favor, find one of those companies and put it on your calendar and make time for it. They generally record those earnings calls so that you don't have to sit in when it's live. You can listen to it later and you'll still hear the questions the analyst asks. They'll ask why investments are being made. They'll ask why they're spinning off divisions of the company, all kinds of stuff that you can learn on your own time. Second, find a finance person in or out of your company, doesn't matter, who can help you understand those numbers and the story that they tell. Third, get a mentor and ask them to teach you about the business. Hopefully you can find someone within your organization. Do not just walk up to anybody and say, will you be my mentor? That's not what you want to do. What you want to say is, I need to understand our company's strategy, how we developed it, and how what I do fits into this. Could you help me with that? Or some other financial skill set you want to develop, or your understanding of the business or the industry or competitors or whatever. But make sure the question is focused. It shouldn't be, can you be my mentor? And secondarily, when you do get one, make sure they're not coaching you on personal greatness or engaging others. You will get enough of that in your career. You need to start focusing on the things that drive the business. Okay, so understand for yourself that no matter what level you are in your company, you can be a leader. You can be seen as a leader, as an individual contributor. It puts you in the pool for people who are considered for promotion. In middle management, you can be seen as a leader and someone others look up to within that area of the organization or that level of the organization. So every time you have an opportunity to demonstrate that you're a leader, think of those three things: using the greatness of you, engaging the greatness of others, demonstrating knowledge around the business, finance, and strategy. So no matter what your position is, embrace the fact that you can be seen as a leader. Identify what you don't know about your company, the business, the strategy, the finances, and start working on those. And ask the questions and find someone to help you. Could be your boss, could be your boss's boss. It could be someone in finance. It could be someone in the strategy area of the organization. There is a leader out there. If you ask the question, we'll be able to answer it for you. Know your career stage, know where you are, and get good enough at it. Don't wait until you have 100% of any project before moving on to the next, except if you're a computer programmer, because none of us really like all those updates you keep sending us. So do us a favor, get really good at what you're doing and look up to the next role, to the next opportunity. Do not get so focused on what you're doing today that you don't look around the organization at other opportunities. Understand what you need to do differently from being an individual contributor to being a people leader, from going from people leadership to business leadership, or department leadership to business leadership. When you are an individual contributor, you don't necessarily lead others unless you're leading a project. But there are those skill sets we talked about earlier in this presentation that you need to show that you have them. You need to then, when you hit middle management, gain more understanding of the business and the strategy and the finances. And then moving from there up to senior leadership, there are other skill sets that you have to demonstrate. And you need to learn the language and the way your C-suite talks about the business to the external world. Start using that language. And then finally, for every one of you who are at a career stage where you have people behind you or below you, reach out, down, and across and bring them with you. And anything you learn today, teach them the same thing. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to say thank you. Sarah, you can come back on, and hopefully we have time for some questions. And I'm
well done with time. We talked
I told you I would talk fast.
That was so great. And oh my gosh, the information that you just provided, I had no idea this idea of the missing 33%. When I saw the description of this program, I was certainly curious, but I really had no idea that that's what you were going to share. It's really pretty incredible. It really is things that I've never heard of. It's 100% the career advice you never got.
I'm telling you, Sarah.
Yeah.
No one ever told me. And when I first joined this organization, I sat in on a presentation the former CEO did called Think Like a CEO. Mm-hmm. And I had just finished the executive leadership program at Kellogg. And I'm sitting it was at a conference, I'm sitting next to a woman who was in that program with me. And we both kind of did one of this, like smacked ourselves on the forehead. I'd already been a GM of a business unit. She was already leading a whole division of a company and a different company. And we looked at each other and go, why didn't anybody tell us this?
Yeah.
And I'm talking way into my career. No one ever told me this. So I'm telling as many people as I can, this is what you need to learn.
Yeah.
And you need to get the help of a mentor. So URI has a mentoring program. I know I've actually joined it and offered to be a mentor. Please don't all 200 of you ask me for that. But the reality of it is you're offering mentorship. Please, please, please do yourselves a favor. Begin there.
Absolutely. And actually, just while we're speaking of that, yes, URI does have a mentorship program. It is a new platform called URI. It's Career Connect is the name of it. And it has been opened up to our entire alumni population at this point, and it will be getting rolled out to students in the near future too, so that students do have the ability to connect with alumni like yourself. And yes, you're probably going to get a lot of requests on LinkedIn and all that good stuff.
Okay, fine. LinkedIn, not.
But I know you enjoy that. So we have some really great questions.
Okay.
They're kind of rolling in. So let's see. I think I'm gonna start. Well, we were just talking about mentorship. So there's actually a mentorship question on here. Let me just find it. So I don't have the name of this individual, but he or she writes, I appreciate the suggestion to find mentorship, but I work in an office where only men are mentored. I've worked in the same office for 3 years and I'm having trouble identifying a mentor. If you have any additional info about that, I would be most appreciative.
So if your organization doesn't have a formal mentoring program, if it's informal mentoring and you see the men within your organization getting it, who are their mentors? Who's the person who's helping that guy who's not helping you? And if you're not getting it because they're offering it, go ask for it. Do yourself a favor, suck it up, because it's not an easy thing to do. And it's kind of makes you a little nervous. And if they say no, it doesn't mean because they don't value you. It could be very well that they're just so busy they don't have time. But ask a very specific question. What is it you want to learn that gets you business, strategic, or financial acumen? Pick something. Ask one question. Go to them and say, can you help me understand this? Not, will you be my mentor? Don't ask that. Ask, can you help me understand how this happens in my company? Or how this happens, or how this decision was made, or something along that way, and begin a conversation with them and say, let them answer, and then say, do you mind if I come back and ask you another question when something comes up that I don't understand? Before you know it, you'll have a mentor.
That's such great advice. You're kind of like sneaking in the back way to find.
If you can't do a direct frontal assault.
Fantastic. No. Right? And there's actually, this question is so good. And I know we speak often about students and young alumni, but this question is so good from Julie, I think it's Vanier, at my age, and her question or her comment is first, at my age, I never had a mentor. Is it too late? And how is it done at 57?
It's never too late. It's never too late. And, you know, surprisingly, the person doesn't need to be older than you either. Mm-hmm. It just has to be an expert in whatever it is that you want to learn. So it could be someone who's in their 30s, could still be mentoring you on knowledge that you don't have, that they have. So it's never, ever too late to have a mentor.
That's so true too. It doesn't, they don't have to be
They don't
older
have to be
than you.
older than you. They don't
We
have
do
to,
think,
they don't, right?
yeah.
They have knowledge that you don't have. And the reality of it, a mentor's job is to help you learn something you don't know, help guide you in how you present that knowledge out to the world. And then finally, eventually, mentors, you would hope, become sponsors. They get to know you well enough that they could advocate for you to get a more responsibility or a different job. That
True.
usually happens when they are at a higher level than you, but age shouldn't have anything to do with it. I'm 58. I still have mentors. Why wouldn't you? Don't you ever want, I mean, the whole point is to learn more and to know more. So it doesn't matter how old you are.
Great answer. Thank you so much. So there's, let's see. So Maritza Jimenez, I feel I'm in the same spot right now of loving a part of my job, but I'm concerned on how to make the change. How were you able to take the leap?
You mean from consumer products to management consulting?
I think that's probably what this question means. Yeah.
Okay, so I used my network that I had developed in order to, one, get the mentoring roles in which I was mentoring women in the MBA program at Wake Forest University. I then used this connection that I had made at the company I was working for when I was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, this woman who was a part of this women's leadership organization that I joined. But before I joined, she was the one who was telling me more about it. And I asked questions about it and shared with her what it was that what I was passionate about and why that sounded so interesting to me. And that when the opportunity came up, if they needed a marketing and communications person, which was what my skill set was, that I'd be really interested in the opportunity to have a conversation about it. So there are always ways in which to ask questions, to meet people, to introduce yourself and ask for them to share more about whatever it is you want to be doing. You know, what is a passion? And if you have a passion for what it is you want to be doing, let them know it, because you'd be surprised. Everybody's looking for good talent. And just because I didn't work in management consulting didn't mean I couldn't. I just had to come at it a different way.
Great. Thank you for that answer.
Get a mentor.
Yeah, a mentor. It kind of seems to go back to mentorship in the end. There's so many good questions here. Paula Lindsay writes, and I this is such a great question. It is very difficult to lead without delegating. How does one develop delegating skills?
Okay, so when you have a team, you should, if you haven't already, assess their skill sets. What is it that they're good at? And make sure you pick the right person to delegate to, and then get out of the way. Because here's the thing I learned, right? When I had a team globally and I, was a bit of a control freak, you don't have to do something the exact same way you do it, as long as they get to the same result. So I had to hand off the department's finances to someone on my team who struggled with it. We met every week. We talked about what it was she was trying to do. I think I made her cry a couple of times because I was a bit of a hard ass. But the reality of it is, you can't take on more responsibility if you can't let go of something. So find 2 or 3 things that you do that you'd like not to do anymore, so you can take something else on. Find someone in your team, in your department, who might want to learn that. Ask, would you be interested in learning this skill? Are you interested in moving in your career? Do you want to replace me at some point in this role? Well, here are the things you need to learn, and let me share them with you. And then let them take the ownership and let them ask you the questions, and tell them you're available at any point in time. Doesn't matter, there are no stupid questions. And let them come to you and ask. Instead of telling them what to do, ask them, well, what should you do next? And if they have no idea, guide them. If they have an idea, listen to them. And just because it may not have been the way you were going to do it doesn't mean it's wrong. So learn to relax a little bit and follow up with me. Find me on LinkedIn and we can continue this conversation. Okay, Sarah, who's next?
Awesome. Yeah, so more. So we've got a great question also from Kathy O'Donnell. Hello, Kathy, by the way. Thanks for joining us. All of this is so spot on. In speaking with students, I am often asked to explain the difference between finding a mentor and or a sponsor within an organization. So what is your take on the difference?
Okay, so there is a huge difference. A mentor works with you on a frequent basis that gives you the opportunity to bounce ideas, bounce your leadership, gives you an opportunity to ask questions. They get to know you really, really well. But they are your coach. They are your teacher. When you talk about a sponsor, they need to know you and they need to recognize that you have the skill sets that are necessary for, role X, Y, and Z. And they're the person who advocates for you when you're not in the room. So let's just say there's a vice president in an organization, you're on their team. They have a role coming up and the role is within a different team, under another vice president, and the vice presidents are meeting and each one is talking about, hey, I've got this project coming up. I need to assign someone. Does anybody have a recommendation? That vice president, who's your sponsor, would turn around and say, hey, so-and-so within my department has been demonstrating X, Y, and Z skill sets. I think they'd make a great person on your team. And I'm going to stake my reputation on the line for suggesting that person. Mentors don't have to stake reputations. Sponsors absolutely do. So it takes a really long time for someone to be willing to put their own capital on the line for you. So it's a very different situation. A sponsor is a much more intensive person in your career who will be the one who taps you on the shoulder or puts you in front of someone else. And that takes a big risk. I had a CEO do that for me, to put me in the role of GM. Scared the crap out of me. Can't believe he asked me to do that. I was completely floored. But he had a board to respond to and people he reported to. And he was willing to put his capital and his reputation on the line to move me up to run this business unit. That's a sponsor. And trust me, it takes an awful lot for someone to be willing to put that capital out there. Mentors will never be a sponsor. Shouldn't say that. Mentors will not act in that role until they get to know you well enough that they feel comfortable. And they've seen you develop the skill sets and they know you're ready. They could then become a sponsor for you. But there is a very distinct difference between mentoring someone and sponsoring someone. I hope that clarifies it.
That was great. I've wondered the same, and that was a really great explanation of that. So I'm glad we got that question. Next question. We still have about 6 minutes left, so we still can get some of these questions in. Can you give advice? And this is from Melissa Rose Gergel. Can you give advice on how to convince potential employers that your skills are transferable to their industry? Example is going from working for healthcare system to health insurance plans.
Okay, so I don't know enough about that industry to give you specifics. But what I would say is, if you know your industry, when you have a conversation or when you do a cover letter, God forbid we still do those, but when you submit a digital document to a company that there's a role that you're interested in, there's two things you need to do. One is you need to make sure you are linked into somebody in that company who can advocate on your behalf. And secondarily, you need to look at what problems is that company trying to solve and how can you help them solve that problem, or what in that role, what is it that role's requirements are, responsibilities are, and how have you done something exactly the same in the skills and the experience you have that you can relate to it, so that it's not about going from a healthcare company to an insurance company or something like that. Healthcare insurance, sorry, that part I lost. But it's about understanding the role and demonstrating how you can do the role. And then find someone within that company that you can connect with who can then advocate on your behalf to the hiring manager. Say, yeah, she can do this. That's the hardest part. Building that network so that you have someone. If you don't know anybody at that company, and if you are not on LinkedIn and you are not going through to say, who do I know that knows someone at that company? That's part of the job of looking for a new job and trying to shift. Because I would never have been considered for that role at the Women's Foodservice Forum if this woman hadn't advocated for me. Even though I did the job and I did it brilliantly, of course, but I would never have gotten the introduction if I hadn't known her.
Right. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for that answer. I think I'm thinking 2 more questions, depending on how things flesh out here. So from Beth Bouleries, who is a member of our Women's Leadership Council. Hello to Beth. Great presentation. So many things we were never told along the way. And I think women many times lack confidence to reach out and ask questions to grow. Any suggestions on how to gain that confidence?
So I don't know anybody who knows everything. There are people who think they know everything, but I don't know anybody who knows everything. Do you? And what I would say is, it's okay to say you don't know. Like, I had to call Joy and say, Joy, I don't know what I'm doing, but I told them I did, right? You need to be comfortable enough to say, I'm not expected to know everything. So can you help me understand something new? I've not been exposed to it in my career. I've never had the opportunity to take a class on it. And quite frankly, half the time what you learn in theory and in class doesn't necessarily make it so that you understand it when it's actually happening in business. So it's okay to say, I've not had exposure to this yet. Would you help me learn a little bit more about it? May I ask you a couple of questions about this? Because in my role, it's not something I've done, but I know I need to know this in order to move forward in my career. So could you help me? I don't know anybody who's, especially in finance, who's, gonna turn down someone who asks that question. If you're earnest and you really want to learn something, I don't know anybody who's gonna say, I'm not teaching you that. Really? I mean, think about it.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I think this is probably going to be our last question. So I do apologize to those that I couldn't get to your questions.
Sarah, excuse me. So anybody we didn't get to your question or you didn't think you had time to put it in there or ask, find me on LinkedIn, ask me the question. My email is on my LinkedIn account.
Awesome. Thank you for that offer to our audience. That's great. So from Jessica Shanklin, what are some leadership and business books you would recommend?
Okay. There's a great book called What the CEO Wants You to Know by Ram Charan. It's probably one of the best books. It's about this thick. He is the guru to CEOs in the Fortune 500. They call him when they need coaching and help. And his book is written in plain English, in simple ways to follow. That's a great book. There's another one called, there's about 2 or 3 different ones on strategy. And what I can do is get them to Sarah. Maybe you can put them up on social media or something.
Yeah, we usually follow up actually to our attendees with an email with some information. So why don't we go ahead and plan to include that? That sounds great.
Give you a list of books. Absolutely.
Perfect. So we're going to have to end it here, but this has been so amazing. I've learned so much. I think our audience has learned so much. We've had some great questions. We are so lucky to have you in the URI community. Thank you so much for spending this hour with us today. And to those of you that joined us today for this, thank you to you as well for taking out time out of your day. And please keep an eye out for future programs in this Women in Leadership speaker series. As mentioned, this program has been recorded and will be sent out to our attendees, made available on our website. In the coming days, you'll receive just a brief survey about this program and an email message from me with the recording, and then also the book recommendations that Kelly is going to make, and a link to our Give to Our Women Transforming Women Endowed Scholarship. Please complete the survey, share your thoughts on today's program so that we can bring you more in this series. So thank you to everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.